I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here. Glad to have you along. Monday, we focus on civic and community concerns, and glad to have an important conversations with leaders at the Minnesota Council, Council on Minnesotans African Heritage. Linda Sloan is here, Theodore is here, Quincy Powell is here, and today we want to talk about the Crown Act. Linda, let me go straight to you. Welcome and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Al. So good to see you again.
Good. And good to see you as well. Theodore, how are you?
Very well, Al. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I see my friend Artiste is here. Artiste, let me have you come back in later in the show. I'm going to put you backstage. I had hoped to have Tyrone Terrell and maybe Reverend Porter at the end of the show to talk a little bit about the anti-crime initiative that they're doing in the community in St. Paul. But we're going to move that back to probably next week. And Artiste, I'll have you come back to join that conversation. So Artiste, we'll talk to you later on. Thank you for being here, though, okay? And I see Representative Esther Agbaje is here. Diana is here. Diana is my partner, and Dee Phillips from Hawthorne. Good to see you both. Linda, let me start with you. Jump right in. What's the Crown Act?
I think because we have Representative Agbaje with us, I think we should just let her talk a little bit about it. I know today is the first day of session and she's got to get back. So maybe we do that.
She's the author of the bill. Absolutely. Representative, how are you? Good to see you again.
Good to see you too, Al, and hi everyone. Glad to be here. Yes, we are back in the first day of session. We just had our first floor session, and there's a number of meetings and committee hearings that'll be starting up this week. So one of those on deck is for the Crown Act, which I have the honor of carrying this year. It had been introduced back in 2020 by Representative Rena Moran, so really thank her for spearheading that in the state of Minnesota. But essentially what the bill does is it ensures that racial traits like hair, texture are also protected under Human Rights Act. So the Crown Act is a national movement. It was first passed in California in 2019, and 12 other states since then have passed it. And in Minnesota, what we're looking to do is we want to update the definition of race under our Human Rights Act in Minnesota. That would include racial traits to be protected like braids, locks, and twists. So that would apply to men and women, would also apply to, other people who can wear their hair like that. So it may not necessarily just default to Black people, but that is primarily who it's meant for. I think this bill really came up because there have been a number of cases where Black women in particular have either been dismissed from a job or told to go home or told to change their hair in order to be quote unquote more professional. But we know that the way our hair grows is professional. As long as you look presentable, you should be fine.
Right.
And so according to statistics from the national movement, Black women are about 1.5 times more likely to be given some type of action in the workforce or school setting because of the way that they wear their hair. We also know that there have been stories throughout the years of students who have either been suspended or disciplined because they wore braids to class. Or I think many people remember the story of the young man who was a wrestler. He was wearing locks, and his locks were cut off on in the gym floor when he was during a meet. So those are kind of traumatic experiences that people shouldn't be having because of how they wear their hair, which is something they really can't change about themselves. And we want to make sure that just like, skin color is protected, your gender is protected, disability is protected, your hair should also be part of that too. Can't hear you if you're speaking now.
What's the process? Thank you. What's the process for moving this legislation forward? Where is it now? And what's the end game, the end goal?
Yes. So we reintroduced it for the new session in 2021. It'll have its first hearing in the House on Thursday. Thursday morning. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that. We'll definitely want members of the community to watch and share that. We are still virtual at the Minnesota House of Representatives, so we won't be able to fill a room per se, but we can fill social media and have people share the link that day of the committee hearing. And also, when you're sharing that link, share your story of where you have felt either pressure or have been explicitly told to change your hair, because we want to make sure that more people across the state are hearing that this is happening to real people. Once it has its house hearing, we believe it's only just the one committee, the Judiciary Committee. That's where it'll be on Thursday. We hope that in the Senate, it'll also receive a hearing. Senator Champion is carrying the bill over there. But if it doesn't, we hope that it comes up in negotiations at the end of the session, where a lot of bills kind of get put together and negotiated on. And that's where we'll be fighting really hard to make sure it gets passed into law.
What's happened in other states?
Other states, so as I mentioned, 12 states have passed it. I don't know them all off the top of my head, but I know California was the first one. I think Colorado is a recent one. New Mexico, I think, might be a recent one. And so, those states have passed it. I think they've seen positive results. I think it's helped to kind of clarify what their human rights laws do. There have been efforts at the federal level. It was introduced in the House of Representatives, I think also the U.S. House of Representatives, I think sometime in 2020. And that had passed the House there, but it hadn't been taken up in the Senate. So it's still something that still needs to get worked on at the federal level. And then we don't have to do this kind of hodgepodge of 50 states.
And I'd love to have you sort of dive a little deeper on the meaning. What's the question? I mean, it's a question of identity. Who gets to determine what the standard is? And it seems to me that this question challenges a cultural norm that places white beauty around the body of white women, in particular, white hair, white culture, white skin. And what this is a challenge to that assumption. And it doesn't deny, beauty can be anywhere, but it says beauty can be everywhere, and it's up to the beholder and the wearer to determine what her or his sensibility about beauty is. That the idea of creating a standard that's based on white sensibility and white profiles and pictures is in itself unfair. Go into that if you would.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's kind of an unfortunate history of this country, right? Where the power structures tend to suppress and deny the whole personhood of many people. I think we saw that with enslaved Africans. We saw that with indigenous people. We even see that with our Asian and Latin American brothers and sisters too. Throughout history, you can find periods where people's identities were being suppressed. I mean, I think the thing that's really interesting about Black hair in particular in the history of the United States, you can go back into the late 1700s, early 1800s, especially in what is now Louisiana. There, free Black women, or mulatto women as they were called back then, used to wear their hair in elaborate styles. They would put in beads, they would put in feathers, and for a while it was fine. But then they were attracting the attention of white men, which in that white supremacist society was not okay. And so then they put in laws saying Black women had to wrap their hair up. They still found ways to still express their beauty, even with the hair wrap. But it's things like that you see that continues to come up. I think, yes, then for a long time, people followed Eurocentric beauty standards, but then we saw another resurgence. There's resurgences throughout the years, but another prominent one was in the 1960s and 70s during the Black Power movement, of people wearing their afros again, people being proud of that. And then we go back into another time period where people are expected to wear their hair straight so they can match the Eurocentric style. And I think in the probably in the past 10 to 15 years, we've seen that changing again, where there's now an embrace of what's called natural hair, where people are wearing more twists, they're wearing their curls, they're wearing their locks, they're wearing their braids, and they're doing it in all spaces and trying to show up as their whole self as much as possible.
You know, the problem is not just in this country, it's a global problem. It's a problem where whites and blacks exist in the same space, and where whites have power and blacks do not. I recall that for a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, ran a series of stories by an attorney in Panama. I think his name was Lionel Barros, who was litigating and writing about the experience of black children in Panamanian schools. And we ran these stories in Spanish and in English in Inside News. I mean, the name of the story was Trienzas. Trienzas is the Spanish word for braids, right? And the movement for affirming one's own identity and beauty is global and met with the same resistance everywhere. So in the public schools in Panama, children were being punished, shamed, families put out of school if the children dared to wear braids to school. If they went against the norm, the convention of the day, the convention being press and curl your hair to make it look like white people's hair. And so this is not just a Minnesota thing, not just a USA thing. It's part of the whole set of difficult arrangements that our people have experienced with colonizers and imperialists all over the planet. But as you are doing now, this discussion is taking place everywhere. And I think that we are and continue to be at a point of an evolving inflection, I guess, or reckoning, one which allows our people to articulate our sense and sensibility of who we are, of how we are, and our value to ourselves and to humanity just as we are. So let me bring other people. Linda, introduce the team you've got assembled here. Theodore, you can do it if you want to, and let's broaden the conversation.
Theodore Rose is the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage, our legislative and policy director, and I will have him go ahead and introduce the rest of the individuals on the call.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, and thank you, Al, for this conversation and representing Agbaje for your leadership on this bill, this very important bill. So we have on the call with us partners who have been diligent in the work pushing for this bill in the legislative process. We have Rachel Hudson with Urban League Twin Cities Young Professionals, and we also have Quincy Powell, who is also with Urban League Twin Cities Young Professionals and as Youth Link, I believe, as well. And they can speak to some of the work that they've been doing in the community regarding testimonials, and really the main thing is we're trying to raise awareness about the significance of this issue in the community. Because of the nature of the problem, right? The nature of racial bias against Black hair, the nature of hair discrimination. It's a cultural problem, right? It's a cultural issue. It's a matter of our aesthetic standards and norms, and so it can be easily taken for granted and go unmarked. So raising awareness that this is an issue in the community, that these standards are not set in stone regarding Eurocentric standards is an important thing. So that's part of the work that we're doing, and also and really then trying to have people engage the legislative process in pushing the bill forward. We think it's important at this time, Black History Month. This month, as we start Black History Month, it's really crucial that Minnesota, the message Minnesota sends on this issue and passing this bill through committee and hopefully very much this session, we make it law. So I'll turn it over to Rachel, to speak more on the work that they've been doing in Quincy as well.
Thank you, Theo. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Al, for having this conversation. Definitely wanted to touch on briefly what the National Urban League Young Professionals have been doing the past year and a half, 2 years, in our efforts to, get the community and, get members and folk behind the movement of getting the Crown Act passed. So I just want to speak briefly around just what we've been doing as a local chapter since last year of 2020. We've been trying to put educational campaigns, social media, digital campaigns out into the universe so that folk are, first of all, just aware of what the Crown Act is. We tend to find out, which Quincy will talk a little bit about later, when it comes to engaging the community. A lot of folk aren't aware of what the Crown Act is, what it stands for, and how it helps them, how it protects them. So it's been our duty to kind of making sure that we are doing it in a creative, innovative way where we're not just talking at people, talking to people, but we're engaging, including people, partnering with folk from the community so that they're a part of this process as well. So I'll pass it over to Quincy to talk a little bit more about what we've been doing locally here in the Twin Cities. And then hopefully we'll get around some examples of some of the experiences that we've been able to hear folks saying. So Quincy.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so adding on to what Rachel was saying, some of the things that we've been doing here locally is really trying to partner with different folks in our community. One of the things that we recently did was do a photo shoot around the Crown Act, but before we engaged in that photo shoot, really had an authentic conversation of what is the Crown Act and how does hair discrimination show up externally and internally, and how do we address that, right? And a lot of people throughout that conversation were starting to realize that they've never really reflected on that, and they never really thought about how it showed up in their lives, and it has. And so one of the young men that day, I remember him saying, like, I don't think I've ever dealt with any hair discrimination. So we got in a conversation about what hair discrimination was, and then he had like 5 different examples of how he's actually dealt with that. And so really trying to push that conversation to really bring awareness around how this is happening to so many different people across our communities. Another event that we're trying to do and engage with the community is to do a panel to have a larger conversation with different folks across our community, different community leaders, DEI professionals, young professionals, students, and people alike.
Al, I think you're on mute again.
Yeah.
I keep muting myself. Okay, great. Well, Quincy, thanks. Quincy, I'm looking at your hair. How do you describe your hair?
Curls. I love my curls, actually. And actually, side note, when we were talking about the Crown Act, I thought about discrimination that I dealt with as it pertained to my curls. I had a job as a receptionist, and I was going to lose my job unless I cut my hair down into 1 inch, which you would not see my curls at all. And HR, at the time I was 17, so I didn't really think about it. But they went as far to say that it was too exotic to be in the showroom, and so it needed to be more presentable. And so I didn't really think about it until we started having more of the conversation around what the Crown Act was and what hair discrimination was. And that was just blatant discrimination and obvious disrespect. And I cut my hair so I could keep my job, but it was super frustrating because when I was younger, I was never able to really have my curls. I never understood why we were always told to cut our hair. And so I was super excited to be able to grow it on my own and have the ability to have the say-so over my hair. But then it felt like I did not have that control or ability anymore. And I needed to show up a certain way in order to be able to be in different environments and in different spaces and to keep my job, to pay my bills. So it's my curls, and I try to, live through those.
I've got a hair story as well. I'm 74 now, but when I was about a little bit younger than you, when I was like maybe 18, I was actually in the Navy. And I remember I finished my freshman year at Morehouse. And in that year, in my own mind, I'd become quote unquote radicalized, meaning I found out about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and the movement, and was enamored with the idea of liberation, of freedom, of justice, and of Black identity, of Black nationalism, of Pan-Africanism, those things that were all new to me as a kid going from Minnesota to Atlanta to go to college. With my sophomore year, I didn't stay in school. I went to the military, went to the Navy for a couple of years, and then came back to finish school. But when I got in the Navy, I got in the Navy with an afro. And at that point in time, the standard was you got to have a certain kind of cut that tapers a certain way, and anything that reflected your identity outside of the military identity was not acceptable. And there were two ways around it. One was to wear the classic stocking cap and plaster your hair down, and then pass through the processes on the ship or during duty. And then in the evening, when you went into the town, you could comb your hair out, and you still have a great afro because it was prepped that way, or you could cut it. And I ended up cutting my hair. But I remember the feeling of anger and the feeling of rage inside that my identity was being forced into submission to somebody else's standard. I kind of understand military, but I kind of don't. And what I can remember is that some years later, one of the great Minnesota communicators, a brother named Tom Tipton, had an agency called Vanguard Agency. He won contracts with the Navy and other military groups where he promoted this idea: you can be black and Navy too. That was the catchphrase. And it created and meant and reflected a concession by the military that black identity is real, valuable, and that it impacts the black soldier, the black sailor's identity and self-worth and his capacity to serve better. So this thing affects all of our lives, and it's been in an impact on our lives forever. They shall, other thoughts. So what do you think we should do in community? How does this relate to other elements and aspects of our life?
It's a great question. And I wanted to say thank you for sharing your story as well. That's a beautiful testimony. It was very surprising. We've heard a couple of military stories over the weekend as well. From current captains who have twists and locks to former military members who it was their job to educate their captains on why they needed certain chemicals or products for their hair. So thank you for that. It's not just a corporate and educational thing as well, but it's also a military and a national issue in addition to that. So to Al, to your question, I do think it's extremely important that we are being allowed to show up as our authentic selves, like Representative Ajay said. Me being a young black man in housing and financial industry and a nonprofit, talking about wealth development, talking about finances, credit, etc. Being able to show up as my authentic self in front of the youth, young men, young boys and girls who just do not see themselves in the industry in a career that is one just as important as a lawyer, a nurse, or a doctor if they're not being able to see someone who looks like them in those positions. So I think it's important that we're having representation, and the only representation that a lot of our youth are exposed to when it comes to our natural hair, locks, and dreads is what they see on TV, what they hear on the radio. So how do we move away from, when our youth wanting to be the next Little Dirt, the next Little Wayne? Even Jay-Z has dreads now, and he's one of the most respected black people in the country. So how do we get folk to understand that it's not the hair, it's more so content of our character that should be judged, like Dr. King said. But how do we make sure that their representation, especially for our new generation, our youth, is being valued, is being uplifted, is being emphasized, especially as we think about some of the public safeties and some of the issues that we're having here in Minnesota, and how just being able to have something like the Crown Act in place to protect our youth from being bullied at schools. I think about Prior Lake, the young lady who had dreads, who was being bullied and everything that was going on with that situation. How do we have these conversations with our youth in our schools, and as well as with our principals, with our folk that are supposed to be taking care of our youth and of our community? So I think it's extremely important that we're having this conversation, not just in the corporate field, but with the youth, with high schoolers and the colleges in addition. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Well, somebody meditate with me on the name Crown Act. What does that mean? What does it feel like? And let me tell you what I think about it, and then you can respond to it, take it up, build on it from there. To acknowledge what's on our head as our crown is subversive. It's phenomenal. It's wonderful. And it brings you a sense of worth, a sense of dignity, a sense of pride. And then when you look at just the idea that what grows naturally in your head and out of your head is a crown, that's a phenomenal thought. And so if it's a crown, who are you? What are you? Yeah. Then when you see what our people do with our hair uh, all over the world, but particularly in Africa, in African cultures and communities and societies where uh, the preparation of the hair, and now here, preparation of hair is high art, phenomenal, fantastic art, a statement every day in who you are, what you stand for, messaging, it's speaking, it's language, right? And I think that is something that is out of antiquity. It's not something that is in reaction to Europeans or reaction to colonialism, but it goes back to our original sense of who we are and our relationship and how our bodies are part of the communication and our hair, our crown, part of the communication that we share with each other. Those are my thoughts. Representative, what do you think? I mean, why the name Crown Act? Am I romanticizing too much? Am I putting too much
No, I don't
into
think
this?
you are. I think they came up with the acronym first, right? Because of many of the things that you said, that it is our crown. It's, it's what we have. It's what we can take pride in. And then they created language around those letters. But I think that that's right. I mean, one of the things that I've experienced in my life is just feeling this immense pressure to kind of tamper down my hair or not wear braids. When in fact, a lot of the styles that we use in Africa are meant to be protective. I remember my mom telling me stories of how when she was in school, they would all plait their hair, which is a style of braiding. And it's a way to protect your hair from the sun and the dust and all of those things. And it's also a time where, people would get together and they would do their hair. Like those stories also talked about how the girls would get together and who could braid the best and who learned this and that. So I think, so for me, I think it's a celebration of who we are. And I think having a law like this, especially in a country of the United States, considering the history that we have, just makes it clear that we recognize and celebrate the differences in all of the people who live in this country. And we want to make sure that that's protected. And so at the end of the day, for me, yeah, I think it is really about kind of celebrating the crowns that we wear on our head.
Awesome. Let me ask you, Representative, and stay as long as you can, what other things are on your agenda for the upcoming session? Any ideas that you want to share right now? And we're going to have you back as often as you're available, obviously.
I know. We'll make this like a bi-weekly session.
Sure.
Yeah. So for me, going into this session, obviously I have the Crown Act. We're very proud of that. Also still working, especially even with SEMA, still working on the African American Family Preservation Act, making sure that our Black children continue to stay with their family members. While it is true that maybe they're with a parent right now who can't take care of them, it doesn't mean that they don't have a cousin or an aunt or an uncle or someone else in their family circle who can take care of them until that parent is ready to step up. And similarly, we also want to make sure that what that bill does is provide resources first rather than defaulting to taking a child out of the home. So we continue to push that effort forward. We're working on that. This year with our $7.7 billion surplus, everyone's got a lot of different ideas. But one thing that I and members of the Posse Caucus are really interested in is, can we focus those monies into 3 areas that we know are going to see significant material benefits for people: housing, education, and public safety. We want to make sure that people are safe and protected. They have a dignified place to live. They have some stability so they can start to take care of other aspects of their lives. We want to make sure that our education system, especially the K through 12 public system, is well resourced, that we're paying our teachers well, we're paying our support staff well, and that we're providing those tools necessary to succeed in the classroom. And then finally, for public safety, Representative Cedric Frazier has a bill that for $100 million that basically provides resources for police to do their job well, because we want to make sure our police are being held to the highest accountable standards as possible, as well as additional funding for community violence prevention, violence interrupters, all of those things that we know that help make communities safe. And so those are the issues that you're going to be hearing a lot from the Posse Caucus and from other members of the legislature to make sure that we're doing right, particularly by Black and Brown Minnesotans, but we know that when we do right by them, everyone else in Minnesota does well.
Is there a number that you could put around a price tag around the initiatives or ideas that are focused in those three areas to affect the communities of color?
Yeah, we're still finalizing some details, so we're hoping in the next couple of weeks or so we'll have some numbers to present to everyone.
Okay, great. Let me go back then to Linda Sloan. Linda, the question of family preservation is one that the council pioneered a dozen years ago when I was chair of the Council on Black Minnesotans. That's what's called. Then we initiated efforts to create family preservation legislation in the state, and the pushback then was akin to people who were in the service pipeline, meaning the families that were doing foster care, experiencing that as really a revenue stream that was significant. And the criticism from our community, from the Black community, was that our state is not making the extra effort to preserve families. As you said, Representative, even if a parent is incapable of managing or supporting or handling the obligations of parenthood, there are aunts, uncles, grands, and other people in the community that can. And the question is the child better off being with another family member or in the community? And the prevailing thought may have been that Black children were better off in white homes. Well, that is an extension of the now viewed as horrific posture. For example, with Native American children, the system of taking Native children out of their culture, out of their families, out of their community, and putting them in boarding schools or in white schools where they were theoretically being de-raced, where the intentional and stated initiative was to make them no longer Indians, but to infuse in them a new identity that made them part of and acceptable to and appreciative of the colonizer, the victor. And so all of these things go into this. Linda, where do you see us now, and what do you see as both support and or resistance to the furthering of the family preservation initiatives as we're presenting them in 2022?
Well, I would say that it is getting some traction, and definitely the community is behind this bill. We've been working with various partners to move it forward. Even in the Department of Human Services, they are looking at this. They have their own version of this bill, but they are also partnering on the bill that's being put forward. I personally have not heard of a lot of opposition, but I'm not working in that specific space. And maybe Theo may have heard of some issues. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the main thing. So first of all, in terms of the bill and why, our council has been behind it, as Al, you were saying, and why we think the community should be in full support. I think among various things, a key aspect is that issue of preservation, and the matter of really addressing whatever those unique, specific local needs are to preserve that family, to maintain the child's connection to those loved ones, right? So I mean, and that can take all kinds of remedies. That can, all kinds of resources can be had for that to happen. And so it's to direct our state and our regional resources towards that effect. I think that's what makes the bill a really important one. It makes the sort of philosophical approach behind it is really important. In terms of opposition or the traction, it's a work in progress. I think I would have Representative Agbaje speak to that because she certainly is in the mix in the House and in the legislative body. But I think that the main thing is us getting, from our council's perspective, is us getting community and getting other stakeholders to actually express their support for the bill. And really that it's to have a long game approach that these things that we have to continue over the next weeks, over the next months, and hopefully this session we do make some headway in terms of getting that legislation passed. But as Linda was saying, the important thing or a key thing for us to always keep in mind about the move to the African American Family Preservation Act and its history is that it has made some changes even without becoming official law, right? There are changes that have been made at both the state and local level based on the mobilizations that have come about because of this effort. So it's gradual. The process is gradual, but I think that we have a lot to look forward to and to be optimistic or hopeful about in terms of what happens this session.
Representative Agbaje, would you comment here? And before you do, my memory says that this is one of the places where the question of power comes up. The power of defining what reality is and what truth is and what is. And the assumption here that is laid bare that we must challenge for the sake of our own humanity is that white culture, European culture is the standard that everybody else has to aspire to. And that necessarily or therefore the cultures that our families come out of are substandard, have less value, and it is in our own good if we can either be disconnected or disavow or change ourselves to gain to be mirrors of white definitions of what human beings are. That's the discussion. That's the where the rubber meets the road, I think. And I think both in the question of the Crown Act and in the question of family preservation, also in the question of what you mentioned about how we approach Representative Frazier's bill to bring 120 million into dealing with corrections and public safety. That what's innovative here from my point of view is, number one, our leadership is saying, yes, we need to support and improve the capacity, the ability of our public safety institutions to serve, but we also need to at last engage, and that means hear and listen to and utilize the wisdom, the knowledge, the lived experiences, and the leadership from within the community that hasn't been the practice in the past. So what do you think? How do you tie all these things together, Representative Agbaje?
No, that's definitely true. I mean, we know the society that we live in. We know that it wants to kind of keep people down who don't conform to the white power structures. But what we also know is that there have been moments of different groups banding together and basically demanding their rights, right? And we have to do that again here. And I think with, bills like the Crown Act and the Family Preservation Act and looking at a different approach to public safety, what we're trying to say or what we're doing is standing up and saying, our communities matter, our values matter, and the way that we show up in life matters. And I think the more that we claim that space, the more you'll have even, I think our white counterparts start to recognize that. Now, that's not the goal because we're fully human, but the idea is to say that we are fully human, we are here, and we're going to take up the space that we deserve. And so I think putting all these together supports the idea of, again, creating healthy communities, safer communities, communities where people can thrive. And that's the purpose of all of these initiatives that we're putting forward.
I think there is a role for, and it's a necessary role for our allies in the white community to play. I think our objective is, as we assert our own identity, is to enable other people to be free of the presumptions and of the articulated lies that they use to mask their atrocity against humanity, right? And to have all of us reconcile the reckoning. How do we look honestly and straightforwardly at the history of the country? And how do we look at our this idea of the democracy that we're creating? So I think we're on the right track. Kimberly is, I think here, Kimberly, bring Kimberly in if you would.
How can I add?
Go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I just want to just highlight this issue of in terms of this week for the Crown Act and that last comment that you made, because that's the, I mean, in terms of the issue of discrimination, I mean, that's the opportunity with regards to the Crown Act, right? Is dealing very directly with these issues of inhumane treatment, of being treated less than, and the sort of black tax that's involved in how we go about our day to day and how we engage the broader mainstream society. So, I mean, the opportunity for Minnesota with regards to the Crown Act, I think, is to send a message that in Minnesota, Black people don't have to go through the ordeal, right, of being marginalized or getting rejected because they are Black. Right? I mean, because of their natural Black hair. They don't have to go through that ordeal. They don't have to be burdened by that extra tax that other people, or at least in the mainstream society, do not have to be burdened with. And that is what fundamentally makes it a human rights issue. And that's what makes it a thing that a problem that our human rights system should respond to very, very, very well, because the message that you don't have to go through the extra work, the psychological labor, the trauma of conforming, to a Eurocentric standard or to a white norm or mythical white images in order to receive and be recognized with respect, or to be considered to be professional, to be dealt with grace. As a human being in Minnesota. So I think that's what's really important. It's an important message for our community to understand, and that we should really push to pass this bill this session.
Let me welcome Kimberly Caprini. She's a school board member for Minneapolis Public Schools. Kimberly, good to see you. How are you? Glad you're here. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you as well, Al. And thank you for giving me a few moments to just comment on this conversation. I have just my heart's been beating so fast listening to the stories, the bill that's being written. I tried to have locks 3 times in my early 20s. And each time my hair started to do what it was supposed to do naturally, I ran to go get my hair done really quick because I just would freak out. And I was worried about what people would think about what I looked like. And one day I was talking to a friend at a show in one of the parks. And he said to me, one day you're going to sit still, be quiet, and find out why it is that you want to be a dreadlock. At that time, that's what we said, dreadlocks. And I did that. I sat still for like a week or two. And I just was trying to figure out, why is it so important for me to do this? And what I found is that it was because I never felt like my authentic self prior to having my natural hair. I mean, there's a host of things that played a part of me not feeling like my authentic self. We all know what those things, growing up in the 70s, going to predominantly white schools, all of those things. But hair was just such a big deal. So in July 7th, 1994, I said, I'm throwing everything away. I threw all my combs away, all my brushes, all my blue grease, all the conditioners, everything. I got rid of all of it. And I just gave in and just let myself be. And it was the most amazing, it was like a revelation. Just the way that people were starting to respond to who I am. I got a lot of negative flack from people, people trying to pull my hat off because they wanted to see what was happening. You know, I was skipped for jobs because of the way my hair looked, but I just pushed through and pushed through. And what I found is I am not my hair. You know, I am my hair does not make me who I am, right? But it is my hair, and this is my natural way of wearing it, and it literally lifted up who I am authentically. And I just have been so moved by so many of the comments that folks have made. I wanted to share that because it's been 28 years that I've had my locks, and I couldn't be more free in this being. And I couldn't imagine having someone tell me that I'd have to change my hair in order to assimilate again, because those days are done. And the last thing I'm going to say is I did put in the chat for the caucuses. There's information there for anyone who wants it. And yes, I am running for re-election. I won't go into any details about that because I don't want to take away from.
Oh, no, you should go into detail. Let's talk politics all the time. So let people know what's going on, and
Yes.
Anything about the caucuses. Yes, that's so important. So take a minute, take whatever time you need to talk about
Well,
caucuses.
if you go to http:// Minneapolis or minneapolisdfl.org/2022, you can sign up to be a delegate. The deadline is February 1st by 9 o'clock. I have a website. It's KimberlyCaprini.com, all one word, KimberlyCaprini.com. You'll find out who my supporters are. You'll find out the work that I've accomplished over the last 3 years. I'm pretty proud of the work that I've accomplished in leadership roles on the board, the feeder school pathway strength that I've created in many of our schools, specifically here on the north side. My work's not done. You know, the district is really working on trying to become a more stable organization. And it has not been easy over the last 2 years with this pandemic. And none of us have been through this before. I told a friend the other day, you can't crawl under a bed to get away from COVID. You can't get in a car and drive away to get away from COVID. It's everywhere. And all of us have learned collectively how to move through this. And we started out with giving one another grace. And somewhere in the middle, we started to kind of throw rocks at each other because we're so frustrated with this COVID-19. I say all of that to say we do have to recognize that we have to move through it. We don't all have all the right answers, but everybody's doing the best that they can to serve each other and our children. So, and that's not just the district, that's every level of government, the city, the state, all of us, you know, are working really hard to move through this. The last thing I'll say about my reelection is, as I said, my time is not done, and we've done something that we're working on doing something different. Every 2 years, our district changes. There's changing of initiatives, there's changing of staff, there's changing of leadership, and it's time to stop changing and stay focused on a plan that is actually going to support children. And the strategic plan that our board will be voting on, I believe, is that plan. There's a lot of detail in it. It's not just talk. It's actually lays out by detail what is going to happen, conditions, and the ways to really set schools up for success. Site councils are a requirement now. That's something that's very dear to my heart. A lot of folks know that I've sat on probably 5 or 6, 7 site councils prior to getting on the board, just to learn how our schools function, and at the district level to see how the district operates. And that's what really started to field this fire in me to be on the school board, because I felt like there are things that I can manage. I pick up what I can manage and I move it towards the center. And in the last 3 years, I've managed to pick up a lot and move it towards the center. millions of dollars in capital improvements in Northside schools. I'm incredibly proud of, with support from my colleagues. The extension of full service community schools, again, the strength of feeder pathways, world language pathways on the north side as well. Super excited about that work. So I'm ready to, buckle up and move through COVID and get back to work. And I certainly hope that folks will check out my website and just learn a little bit more about me and reach out. I've got my information on my website. So if you want to talk, I'm ready to talk.
Director Caprini, take a minute and describe for our viewers and listeners the structure of the district. How many districts are there, and how many are up for election? How many are representing a district? How many are at large? And who's running the show right now with the Minneapolis Public Schools?
So there are 9 board directors. There are 3 at-large seats, and right now, District 1, 3, 5, and the 2 at-large seats are up for election. Now, I haven't heard of very many people announcing in the districts, and I'm kind of assuming it's because we haven't figured out the redistricting piece yet. That could be the case. My understanding is it's not going to change that much, but I'm not really sure. There's a meeting next week, I believe, with the Charter Commission to discuss the redistricting in Minneapolis. So that's what's up. There are 2 seats citywide. Of course, I want to keep mine. And then, of course, 1, 3, and 5. And then as far as who's in charge, Kimberly Ellison is our chair of the board. Really excited to continue to work with her. It's been an amazing 3 years actually working with the whole board. I feel like we have worked in the 3 years that I've been on the board in true governance, letting the superintendent know what our goals and values and mission is, and putting him to charge that work with in our schools. The sad part is we got punched in the gut by COVID, but it hasn't stopped us from continuing to implement the comprehensive district design that was incredibly important, in my opinion, to our district, to ensure that, or to centralize magnets so that more children across the city had access to those opportunities, and really build on the feeder pathways. It's my opinion that community schools, feeder pathways are what actually create strong neighborhoods, and strong neighborhoods support building strong cities. I knew that I wanted to send my 22-year-old to Henry when she was 3 years old. I just had to figure out how to get her there. And I did. And she is graduating this spring from the University of Minnesota with a degree in kinesiology. Very proud of her.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Extremely proud of that. I've got a 18-year-old that's also graduating from Henry in June, and she just committed to William Penn University to play volleyball. So, academics, thank you. Academics is incredibly important to us, but you know what? Those experiences and opportunities that will lift up that academic progress are incredibly important. So my fight for our kids is to ensure that, yes, I want literacy. I want to continue to move that dial. We moved at 2% prior to the pandemic. We moved math literacy to 2 points prior to the pandemic. But it's those opportunities with art and sports and club and all of those other things that bring out this holistic education that kids need in order to figure out what they want to do, what they want to be, or be successful. So I don't know. I'm just really excited about the work. I'm very passionate about what I do. I feel like I was built for this, and I want my job.
One last question then. Describe the financial impact of the district. I'm, if recollection serves me, sure that this is about a $500 million, upwards of a $500 million business. What is the number? And the reason it's important to talk about it is that we don't talk about it enough. Education, the enterprise itself, is a phenomenal revenue organization or process and an opportunity. And the question is, does our community benefit from, shape, participate in those revenue streams? Or is it that we simply get to be the product and somebody else makes the money? How do we change that equation so that our people not only benefit from the training, the instruction, but from the jobs, from the contracts, from the entire ecosystem that makes a school district? It's a financial ecosystem. How do we explain that so that our community is conversant and understands the money, where it goes, so we can watch the money and benefit from it? What do you think?
That's a lot, and I have a lot to say. If I didn't have to be at the Davis Center in 5 minutes, I would. We would be on this call for
give me
hours.
the 30-second answer, and we'll come back to it.
First thing is this. Yes, it is billions and billions of dollars to run a public institution like public education. And as Representative Abaje said, public schools are not fully funded. I would say probably over the last 20 years, we have not even reached the level of inflation that would actually support a lot of the things that you're saying. What we have done is we recognize that a very large portion of that money goes to who? To people. And enrollment is something that has been decreasing. The birth rate is low. We do have an increase in middle schools and high schools for students, but at the elementary level, it's decreased. So one of the ways, and again, this is my opinion, it's the work that we've done, that we can support the district or our families by offering everything that you mentioned, is by centralizing those magnets, by focusing on those community schools and making sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that those schools that are open have the programs that are going to benefit the children in those neighborhoods. But there has to be some kind of structure, right? We can't be schools just doing whatever it is we want to. We are a district of schools and not schools within a district. But that doesn't mean that we can't have schools create their own identity so that they're able to meet the needs of the community that they are serving. And I believe when schools are able to do that, that attracts people, that attracts families to come to schools. School climate is incredibly important. How kids feel in their building, how staff feels about one another. All of those things are things the district is working, they're doing their due diligence on. When it comes to the future, I'm not gonna lie. We could have closed schools. And we didn't. Instead, we decided to see where we were gonna land and really try and strengthen the schools that we have. And in the future, there may be a time where we're gonna have to take a look at some consolidation, but not this moment. In my opinion, it's inevitable because again, enrollment is decreasing, not just in Minneapolis public schools, but across the country. There is still a war, in my opinion, on public education, on public institutions. Look at the public housing crisis. When the federal government pulled out of public housing, look at where we are now. And I'm not suggesting the federal government's going to pull out of supporting public schools, but when we talk about things, I won't even bring, choice. It's great. Families should have choice. I completely agree with that. But when there's so much choice, it's hard to be able to continue to try to build something from the ground up. So public education isn't going anywhere. And the last thing I want to see is our kids who had an education education that I did growing up, where I literally didn't find out that I was dyslexic until I took an entrance class or test at my first year in college. And it just made sense why I struggled so hard. And that's another reason why I got into this work, was because I don't want to see kids like myself just struggle as much as I did. And people say, oh, she's so articulate. But I struggled to read. I couldn't even write a check at 25. That's not even right. No. So there's a lot of work to be done. And you
got to run, Director Caprini. Thank you so much for being here, for your comments on the subject of the Crown Act, but also your general updating on the process for elections and the caucuses coming up. Thank you so much. We're almost out of time. I wanted to circle back to Representative Esther Agbaje just to tell you thank you for being here. Thank you for your work and leadership over at the state. And if you have a closing comment, and before and after that, I wanted to ask Diana to invite people to upcoming meetings at Hawthorne. So, Representative.
I just want to say again, thank you particularly to Linda and Theo and Rachel and Quincy. You guys have been awesome as advocates and being kind of the backbone of this. And really looking forward to continuing to share with the community and ways they can get involved. And thank you both to you, Al, and Kim, for sharing your hair stories. We need more of those because it is, like you were saying, Kim, we need to be able to be free, and we shouldn't feel, whether you're told explicitly or indirectly, we shouldn't feel that we have to hide ourselves in order to fit in. So thank you guys so much for your time today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon now.
Thank you. Thank you. Diana, what's on the agenda coming up for
Thank you, Al. Join us this Thursday morning for the Hawthorne Huddle. It is actually about the school administration. We're going to have the principal from Nellie Stone Johnson and the assistant principal from North Community High come and talk about how the kids is dealing with going back to school, the e-learning, and the COVID. And then we're also going to honor two great organizations in the community. And I'm going to ask Al now if you would do the honors for me on Wednesday, since you have such a good rapport with these two families. And then on February
Wednesday or Thursday? You mean on Thursday?
No, Thursday morning.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then on February the 18th, the coalition, we're going to have Dr. Deeswick come and talk about substance abuse around pregnancy and mental health. And you can email me at dhawkins@hncmpls.org, and I will send you links for both events.
Let me acknowledge that Maureen Martin put a comment in the comment section. She says that at Black App, Black is BLAQ, app, APP, we have a campaign for Black History Month, hashtag Black in Beauty. It will be on TikTok and Instagram. Our goal is to alter the algorithm to be more inclusive when people search for images of beautiful Black women and a greater variety of hair and skin tones. So information, you can reach out to her, Maureen, at blackapp.org or at www.blackapp.org. Black is BLAQ. BLAQAPP.org. That's it. Great program, great conversation. Brother Quincy, Brother Vachelle, Theodore, and Linda, excellent. We look forward to continuing working with both the neighborhoods and the council to bring legislative and community issues to the front. Dee, thank you for your support, your guidance in this. We're all in this together. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take